Welcome to Nacht, Waffen Pilot with Penny Bradley, and today I have returning guest Shane Bales, aka Shane Sidor, aka Shane the Ruiner. And we've known each other since 2016, where apparently I was obnoxious when I first made contact. Um, yeah, well, I thought I was just being nervous. So, yeah, okay. Um, anyway, I have not exactly been stalking him. Okay. I am a supporter on his Patreon, and I know where his website is. And I found where he's offering counseling services, and that piqued my curiosity. And so instead of going through and doing Google searches and being truly stalkish, I thought I would ask him on the show to talk about it. Welcome, Shane.
Thank you. So yeah, yeah, I call it metaphysical support. So basically it's kind of like a bridge between what would be traditional talk therapy as well as all of the other stuff that we have to deal with that traditional therapists kind of, to be nice, I'll say don't talk about, can't talk about most of the time or won't talk about. So yeah,
Or totally freak out about and chase you out of the room.
that too. There's a lot of people out there who have, the need to talk to someone who understands when
Mhm.
it comes to these topics, and I'm someone who understands. So, in lieu of not getting the lollipop, I wasn't able to do the type of work that I would normally do in that way because I would need to be in hospitals and things like that. I'm not allowed to do that. So, thought, well, everyone's been asking me to do this for a long time. I might as well do this. So yeah, that's kind of what it is. And then obviously the magic class as well. It's kind of like my own version of a self help class that allows people to become magicians. Not like the hey, look at this deck of cards magicians, but the ones that actually understand how they generate energy and can use that energy for things.
So like the stuff I was taught in Schwarze Sonne.
Well, yes, like even with myself, it's everything I was taught. I've kind of the way I ta tell people, it's kind of like what Bruce Lee did with martial arts. We went out and learned a bunch, and then came up with Jeet Kune Do, which was him going, "Hey, if I get in a fight, I don't have time to do this to punch a guy, and
Yeah.
what are the workarounds? And this isn't really practical. This isn't really practical." His basic quote is pretty much what I've done, which is adopt what is useful, discard what is not, and then I do the rest of the quote. I encourage the rest of the quote, which is for you to add what is inherently your own. So once again, I learned a bunch of different structures of magic, all
You
of them.
learn music is math is magic.
It is, yes. And there's an element of music that's tied into why magic works, but
Mhm.
that's part of what we talk about in the class as well. Um, so what I identified was that pretty much all of those systems kind of put us in a place where we are not actually doing magic. We are becoming a vessel for some other entity to exercise its energy through us, or winning the favor of some type of spirit or deity to do magic for us, right? If you think of even what a shaman is doing, they're doing their dance to win the favor of the elementals who then provide the rain, right? So it's not even him causing the energy movement that would be required to produce the rain. It is these elementals. Now they have a direct energy with, or a direct relationship with energy because they don't have a meat suit to operate through like we do, right? So it is in a way easier for them. But in terms of, what we were taught in programs and what's kind of available to the public, they all have these gatekeepers in place. And they're all there because they don't trust us to think, feel, and act well, right? And responsibly. I always bring up,
Responsibly is a big issue. Some of the online magic groups that I've sat in, I don't contribute a lot because I'm apparently over their heads. But it's amusing to watch what they say, and some days I just go, "Oh my God." But I wasn't taught to use a gatekeeper. I was taught to use my own connection to source.
well, it depends on what that filter is through, of course. I don't know exactly what you were taught, but I do know that there isn't a magical system on this planet right now that we can point to that is not with it out a gatekeeper. Like if you want to name any system, they all have one, right? And if you could find one that didn't, I would be pretty impressed. And if not, even if we are taught to use our own energy in context with magic, it's usually coming out of this energy field right here, which for the majority of us is pretty muddy, right? Like there's not
Yeah.
just one energy within this field for any of us right now. And that's what makes it dangerous because if we think we're sending energy, we might have the direction correct, but we definitely don't have the frequency correct because we don't even know what the frequency of this is yet, right?
Okay.
We're sending that out. That's why sometimes we get some really negative rebounds on sending good vibes to people, as an example, right? Is because we're not actually sending 100% good vibes. We're sending good vibes that is made up of energy that we got because we were triggered by something someone said to us on Facebook, right? Or something that asshole who cut us off in traffic. And so what we're sending contains the frequency of that asshole cutting us off in traffic and that asshole on Facebook who wouldn't shut up, right? So that's not what.
Or the person on Facebook who thought they were doing you a favor by praying for you and you ended up covered in slime. And whatever you're sending is through the slime.
Well, and that's kind of an example of what I mean, of why what
Yeah,
we're
that's
doing,
what,
what the relationship that we have with sending and receiving energy from each other is it's built on a parasitic system and by no fault of our own is parasitic, right? Like even most people, when they're not feeling so good, they're looking for something outside of themselves to make them feel better. Even if that's, that cup of tea, right? Or if it's, I got to go see this person who will make me laugh and make me feel better, right? That's in a way we are taking from outside of ourselves. We're going outside of ourselves for something, which doesn't make a lot of sense considering the main reason we have so many problems is we generate too much energy. And because we generate too much uncontained energy, we are a beacon of light. We're a flame for a moth when it comes to, parasitic entities, demons, energy vampires, anything like that. Uh, and because we're doing that, we're kind of like a light source for them. And so they come to feed off of us. And then they teach us things that also create that process, right? Where we're generating too much energy and we're not containing that energy. And so they can sit right up there and feed off all that energy that we're generating for them, right? So even
yeah.
a lot of the what we think are positive practices through the new age community have been set up so that we will have a high vibration, which makes us generate too much energy and become a good source of food.
Hmm. Maybe that's why I always rejected New Age.
Maybe the other
I
side
I
that I think
saw
most,
I saw New Age as basically Christianity without Christ. And the same problems I saw in Christianity, I am seeing in New Age, including the mind control issues.
yeah, yeah, it's an unfortunate thing because it's not that anyone is doing this intentionally. They're actually looking for truth, right? It's just that
Mhm.
it's been kind of hijacked along the way, and it sounds right, like have a high vibration, feel good all the time. What happens when we get overly excited? We crash really easy,
Mhm.
right? That's our energy centers trying to find balance. So if
Mhm.
we let ourselves get so high vibration, we need to be balanced in order to operate, right? So what our
Yeah.
we will do is throw something bad at us, have like some kind of drama pop up, crash our car, get a headache, something that just crashes us down off of that high. And then eventually we start working our way back up to balance. If we can maintain a semblance of balance through all of our different energy exchanges, then we don't ever have to worry about the crash, right? I've had so many girlfriends in my life be like, you never get excited about anything. I'm like, I actually I do. I look forward to a lot of things. I'm excited about a lot of things. I just don't vibrate with that
You don't
excitement.
flutter.
Exactly. I'm like, I at that moment, I will enjoy that thing. Between now and then, I don't need to let my energy fluctuate based on that experience. Between now and then, I can keep it baseline. And so that's how I do it. And so basically with the magic class, like everyone asks, like how I survived, how I got out without a lot of problems, and how I can still even interact with it to this day, as well as maintain a regular life where I've got well, one adult children, nearly two adult children, um, was legal guardian to younger brothers. I've had regular, good, high responsibility jobs, all of that stuff. So I have my shit together, if you will. And a lot of people who've been through what I have don't, right? A lot of people who've been through a lot less than I have don't. And so the answer is all of these things that I will then teach others, right? So that's kind of how I put it all together, why I've put it all together, what it's for. And then usually, you can kind of couple that with support, right? Because, life goes on and we bump into things and we forget, right? We kind of forget the lessons we've learned, the experiences we've had in the moment. And
It's easy to shift back into neutral.
exactly, exactly. And something that, as nefarious as everything that we went through was, something that we always did have was someone there to help us through that, right? Someone there to, even if it was in a not so nice way, help us get through those things, help us make sense of them. And then the rest we put together on our own, right? Because we did have certain outlets. And so most
Sorry
people
about
don't.
sorry about the phone ringing. This is a landline.
Those still exist.
Yes.
I honestly didn't even hear it. So you're okay.
I'm old school. Actually, that energy field that you talk about, if I'm using a cell phone very much, my energy field will literally fry the machine. So I can't use one.
One thing about those older versions of the programs is, your energy would be a lot less regulated than someone who was in them now, right? Or someone who not
Mhm.
even now, but like more recently is what I mean, because they hadn't figured it out yet, right? So it's like that dynamic of being the oldest child and your parents made all the mistakes with you, right?
I had that too.
Yeah, you were in that generation where they made all of those mistakes.
I was in that generation where that parents really truly believed that babies were born blank and that what they became as adults was what the parents put into them. And so the fact that I came pre-programmed was a real problem for them.
And these programs have grown over time as they've discovered more. Like
Mhm.
they actually, even in the nuts and bolts programs, they started with this assumption that DNA was more important than soul, right? And
Mhm.
it's been over time that they figured out that that was A, wrong, and B, now that they know that it's wrong, how to adjust to it, right? Like there's only so much you can do to manipulate DNA to affect a soul, right? And they used to believe they could fully control souls through manipulating DNA, which is
Yeah,
just not true. Um,
but they can attract a different kind of soul by manipulating the
exactly,
DNA.
exactly. It's like, it's like different kinds of cars, right? Like I might be find it easier to drive a muscle car than a Tesla, right? Where you might find a Tesla is better for you than a muscle car. And it's the same type of idea.
I
Certain
love
people.
muscle cars. But
Well,
then
that's
I listen to metal music and I wear dragons on my t-shirts.
well, that's what not everyone likes the same flavor of ice cream, right? So,
Exactly.
different people have different talents. I mean, we're all capable of the same things in theory, but our talents cause us to develop skills which then lead to us getting better in certain areas. And magic and the programs have very much been like that, right? Where it's like people are certain, they call it like a proclivity, or you're better suited for this particular type of program. But they could technically train you in any of them. It's what's easier to put someone into an art class because they show artistic abilities, or to put them into a math class because they show artistic abilities, right? So
Yeah,
obviously you go with the art class, but you can still teach them math, right? Or if the
yeah.
art class were theoretically full, then you could put them in the math class or whatever that is. But that's kind
Well,
of how.
you might teach them both, but expect them to be better at the art.
Exactly, exactly. And yeah, um, it's the same thing with any type of teaching. The reason why there's different systems of magic, the reason why there's different religions, the reason why there's even different frameworks of psychology is because not everyone learns the same way, not everyone processes the same way, and not everyone outputs the same way, right? So
Yeah.
uh, it's to have different avenues for people to go so that we could all theoretically end up in the same place is part of the, you know, theoretical intention behind having all these different pathways. Unfortunately, all
Uh,
these pathways are leading us in a circle, but that's a different type of conversation.
I don't think we're meant to end up the same place. And I think that's part of the problem with the paradigm.
Well, when I say the same place, I just mean to be able to get to become who we truly are, right? Like whatever
Okay,
that
that I
version
can go with.
is. Yeah.
Now,
I don't mean that we all end up in like a one world, like every utopia. Like I am the last person to think that that's even good, let alone believe that that will ever actually happen. But
I'll tell you, utopias scare me because they tend to be everybody is expected to think alike. And that to me sounds like tyranny.
well, it very quickly becomes the same thing we're witnessing as a problem now, which is this tribalism, like the tribalistic mindset, and everyone having to pick a side or like fighting for their side blindly, and everything that's wrong is based on that issue, which I think is like a collective lesson that humanity is figuring out right now, is to have new relationships with a lot of things, but one of those new relationships is with the idea of competition, because we have like this really um, hard view of what competition is, and not understanding where the positive end of it lies anymore. It's been
Yeah,
lost. It's like
I'm going to give you a concept that I was slapped up the side of the head with in the 80s. Okay. I'm this very light-skinned person, and all three of my children were blonde, blue-eyed. And we lived in the minority part of Fresno. And we went to this grocery store, corner market. It was ran by Armenians, and everybody who worked there was a different minority. And one of the bag boys was going to Fresno State and taking anthropology, and he asks me one day, he says, "What do you think about anthropocentrism? The idea that everybody prefers their own kind." And he and I got into this philosophical discussion. Yes, I have always been me. And I told him, I think the crux of the matter is how do we define who is our own kind? I think that is the problem that humanity is having to deal with right now, is who is our own kind. And I don't think we're going to make a lot of progress until we decide that all humans from Earth are our own kind.
Love, it's kind of said as a joke. It's in a Pussifer song, and they say, "We will never know world peace until three people can simultaneously look each other in the eye."
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of where we're at. And I think that what we're going through with this evolution right now is kind of a rise out of old systems of morality into a more universal consciousness where we're starting to see humans as humans, right?
Yes.
I think that all the stuff that we maybe don't like with the gender identity and things attached to that that are going on are a natural process towards that, right? It's almost like the growing pains to get to a good place. And that goes back into what I was saying about balance earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, like we can see even in the collective how everything has gone way too far to one side and now it's slingshotting back the other way, right? And so what we're going to
Yeah.
have to do is wait for that to bottom out, and then when it comes back up again, let's not like jump on the other end of the seesaw all at once, right? Like let's slowly build it back up. That's kind of been a problem with this planet for a long time. It's like anytime there has been artificial or natural resets that have gone on, it's almost like they just come out of the gate running, where they just kind of need to take that tortoise approach to it for once, where they kind of slowly remember and slowly build back, instead of no, 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 we were way the fuck over there yesterday, I want to get back there, right?
Yeah.
It's like over there is over there. Let's see what's between here and there, and let's see if there's maybe some of the scenery we forgot to stop and look at along the way, because that is
And
the problem.
and maybe something is better than over there.
Exactly. And maybe while we're on our way there, we start seeing that there's other paths we could have taken along the way, instead of just leapfrogging it all with technology, right? And and ending up there. So yeah, I think that's collectively the lesson that's kind of being learned here.
Well, I hope the lesson is being learned and not just skipped over, because I'm seeing a lot of panic from from people that don't want to change. It's this is the way we have always done it. Why do you want it different?
Or this is just the way we've always wanted it, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, which is the other
Or
part.
this
Yeah.
is this is good for our team, so why do you
Yeah.
want to take it from us?
Exactly. It's like a planet of addicts who just have to step into acceptance. You know what I mean? Like accept that you're not either as great or as shitty as you believe you are. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
You are both, and that is magic, right? And
isn't that the whole underlying thing with balance is that you are both and you need to accept that you are both, and it's out of the acceptance of our shadow that we actually find our strength.
yeah, well, exactly, right? It's you were kind of asking the first question, I know, related especially to program members, SSP people, stuff like that. But that's a big part of it, in that, like, I actually lost my train of thought. What did you just say?
I just said that. Okay. I can't remember the exact wording, but it's when we embrace our shadow, we
The
find our
integration.
strength.
It's the integration, sorry. Yeah, that
Integration.
was what read it to me. What we have to do with our shadow is no different than what you have to do with your altars, right?
Exactly.
It's
Actually, I have to integrate another personality into mine and then deal with what the personality has done in their time in the body or
exactly.
their time in another body.
And we all have a shadow that is exactly the same concept, right? Like it
Yes.
really is the same thing. Um, One thing I've been encouraging people, especially through the magic class, and I'll say it here too, is that shadow part of ourselves we've looked at as something we need to destroy, right? And like
Mhm.
that's been our misunderstanding, I think. Like I hear people don't, I've done all my shadow work, I don't have a shadow left. Well, then you haven't done all your shadow work. All you've done is bury your shadow under a bunch of fluff that you threw on top of it. And eventually that shadow is going to dig its way out. And it's coming back. It's still there. It's not ever going to go anywhere. It's a part of us. We
It's, yeah,
are
I,
the yin and the yang. We are the light and the dark, all in one.
yes,
And they are our shadow or our subconscious, if that's what you want to call it, is no different than an altar. Their understanding of that as a fundamental is how they learned how to create altars in the first place. So it's
yeah.
if we just
I
get
have,
back to the foundation.
I have a lot of people in the community that are telling me, well, it's easy to deal with altars. You just destroy them. And I'm like, you what?
Yes. Yeah.
This is shock. This is not approval, just in case. Um, you can't get rid of part of yourself without diminishing yourself. It's like cutting off your arm.
Well, it's a very simple thing that people need to get into their head is that you are a soul playing a game through this body, right? Like the soul exists outside of this entire realm. So that means there's nothing that can happen within this realm that truly disconnects, that truly does anything to that soul. If anything, it's working the opposite way where there's things happening outside of here that is reflecting as negative in here, but it's definitely not going the opposite way. And why I say that is, in these programs especially, but definitely through religion and even through magical practices, we have this false concept of capture, of trapping, of
Mhm.
imprisoning, and of destroying souls. And that belief is what leads to things like a soul trap technology even working, right? I think the best way that I've ever described this is the universe views the buyer and seller of lies as equal, which means if you are going to convince yourself that that lie is true, you are just as complicit in the lie as the person who told it to you. And that's
Yes.
just the way it is. We both have responsibility on that way. And why I say that is if your soul has been captured, if your soul has been destroyed, that's because you allowed your soul to be captured. You believed that, right? But even because you believe that outside of here, your soul's fine. And he's kind of laughing at you in here, being like, oh, you think you're captured in there, do you? Oh, you think, right? Like, and yeah, I think
I'm sorry. Uh,
our own desire to turn what's going on here into a Hollywood movie, as opposed to acknowledging that the truth is stranger than fiction, but it doesn't follow the same protocols. Like it doesn't follow the same arcs. It's not a movie at the end of the day, right? Like
at the end of
it
the
is
day,
reality.
it's much more like a bad acid trip than a Hollywood movie.
Yeah, things aren't as there's more nuance to life than there is to movies, right? And
Yes.
so the truth also has that kind of nuance to it. And yeah, it can be known, right? Like that's something that all spiritual teachers on both sides of the fence always do come back to, is that it can be known. We don't hear that part a lot of the time.
Yeah, I have to walk a really tight line because this was someone who came to me for counseling, but she had an interesting concept that she thought that her persona was the altar on a 60th back, and she had no idea who her real person was, and wanted me to tell her the meaning of her life if she was an altar. And I'm still mind boggled that number one, that she thought I could answer this for her. And secondly, that she had that kind of depth of thought to even come up with this problem.
Yeah, it's almost heartbreaking from my perspective to know all of these people who've come out of these programs are now out in society, and the only real outlet or understand or out the only real avenue for understanding is this fucking community. Because this community has been ah, partially from our own doing and partially from outside tinkering. It's not what it's meant to be, right? And it does unfortunately create a structure where people can do more harm than good for themselves.
I,
But
I have been
I also put a lot of
trying,
faith in people.
I have been trying to do with my own counseling. I have been trying to just do the talk thing because most of these people have never been heard by anybody. They've Everybody has told them to shut the fuck up, go away, you're crazy, I don't want to hear this. You're delusional, you're making shit up. You have no idea what you're talking about. And this is what we're told day in and day out. And so I just let them talk. And if they start talking self-harm or harm to others, then I put them back on the track of, look, we're just talking about what's happened to you. We're not making any plans. And it usually takes 8 months to 18 months, and they finally talked it out, and then they're okay with it. It's like part of them integrated that, yeah, this happened to me, but I'm okay now. And that's the approach that I've been taking. And out of the 400 or so people that I've helped with this, 3 have paid me. So I'm not out there making money off the public. So I'm not a licensed counselor either. So I didn't think it was appropriate for me to be charging a fee. I call it peer counseling, and I'm just listening. And when I feel them going into something dangerous, I tell them, you need a real counselor, somebody licensed now. I'm not gonna sit there and let people kill themselves.
Well, I should hope not.
You know, so I was really curious what you did that was different from that. If you did anything different from that.
Well, every person's different, right? So what
Yeah.
every person needs is different. So the more tools you have, right, the more likely it is you'll have the tool for the job. And I have had the opportunity to collect more tools than pretty much anyone could going to any school, or all of them, right? So that's kind of it, is like, whatever tool you need out of my tool belt, I can give to you. So therefore, it's not about me doing it for you. It's
Mm,
about teaching you how to do it for yourself, right?
mhm.
Like I said, it's the answer to that question of the why and how with my own experiences. This is why and how. No one did it for me. I had to learn how to do it, right? I had to learn
Yeah.
how to heal and process and learn and grow and develop all despite all of that stuff, right? And those are useful tools that anyone can learn how to use, right? And it's just been not what we're taught in school, and it's not what's nurtured in society in any sort of way, right? It's even like with the magic class. Like I call it a class, but it's one-on-one. And it's one-on-one because, if you're in a class, you're going to double you're going to question your own question, right?
Yeah.
You're not even going to want to just ask what you're truly thinking because you're worried about the perception of the other people in the class,
Yeah,
right?
you don't want to be the dummy in the class, but at least I have this social conditioning. I don't want to be the smartest one in the class either.
Well, yeah, that's no fun either because
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, like the ability to actually understand things is what mentors do for you, right? That's the difference between a mentor and a teacher, is they are helping you develop your own understanding as opposed to just teaching you a concept and idea, right? And so you might need to
Okay.
hear the same thing worded 4 or 5 different ways in order for it to be worded the way that actually does sink in for you. And
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you. It doesn't even mean that there's anything wrong with your teacher if the way that they're saying it isn't. It's just like I was saying that everyone's different, right? It's
Yeah,
our
it's the
diversity.
connection between and the connection between the two people and the understanding that transfers, not just the words.
And that is part of the magic here, is all of that diversity. And it's just funny because a lot of our ideals and what we say we want in terms of like some type of global outcome here take us so far away from that, right? Like it's ironic to me when I listen to some people talk about like how we should live on this planet. They're more or less describing a one world government with a one world religion and a one world language, right? Which
More or
also
less.
which also that's the essence, that's where it ends up, right? Which
Yeah,
is
that's where it ends up
the
in
same
practice.
thing that they're talking about, like the people that we're fighting against want as well. We're defining a difference based on how we get there, but we end up in the same place.
I
And I
think
don't
they're
think we
more
want the
fighting.
same place.
I think they're more fighting over who's going to be the boss.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. It's like,
I see a lot of humanity's problems as being dominance issues.
oh
It's
no,
I don't care if I'm the dumbest person in the room, I'm going to rule.
right. And it's like we want to punish them in the same way that they've become guilty. It doesn't, it's kind of illogical, and that's just something humans need.
Humans are not logical as a general rule.
That's just something humans need to look at, and they're being forced to look at it now because it's playing out in every dynamic of their life, right? Like that separation it's here, it's now, and we're living through it. Everything we've been talking about for the last 20 years, depending on who you are, it's happening right now. And now
Yeah.
it's to walk the talk. We'll see how much of all that stuff you've said over the last 20 years you actually truly believe. And when I look around, I see a lot of people falling apart over all of this. So that tells me that they didn't really believe what they've been saying they've been believing this whole time.
Yeah. I have always believed in equality under the law. Um, I have always believed that those most competent should be in charge, no matter what they look like. Um, but that those in charge should have the benefit of the majority at heart rather than personal gain. And that's a tough thing to pull off.
Well, it is too. And like, there's again nuance to that because,
Of
the people
course.
who raised me think they're doing the right thing, right? They
Yeah.
don't think they're doing it just for personal gain. They just think they know better than you and I know, right? And they believe
Yeah.
that. They've got
That's
an
what,
arrogance towards that they don't see through. But that's not to say that they think they're They're not like, ah, fuck them, right? Like that's not really the attitude. They're
Um,
like,
I've I've seen that attitude in individuals.
in
Okay.
individuals, of course, of
Now,
course. We can't generalize and say that like they're not all the same, just like you and I are not the same, right? Like we,
right.
even if we're on the same side and a different side than them, we're just as different. And even you and I disagree on a lot, right? And they disagree on a lot too.
Actually, we don't disagree on a lot. We only disagree on a couple
Maybe
of
disagree is
issues.
a strong word. Differ, right? We
Yeah,
differ in this, right? And maybe
yeah.
disagree is we don't do things the same way. We don't look at things the same way exactly, and neither do they. The difference between them and us is they've decided to collectively work towards an end.
Hmm.
And we can't decide to do that. And if we do, we want the same end they want, apparently. So,
Or pretty close to it, but with somebody
or
else in charge.
with someone else in charge, yeah.
Yeah, that seems to be the underlying rule is we all, how is the old song goes, everybody wants to rule the world.
Yeah, exactly. And
That
it's the
that seems
same
to be
attitude.
the that seems to be the problem. Now, the more public I have become, the more contact I have had with those folks. And yeah, I have found that some of them are deliberately telling lies. Some of them are deliberately manipulating people like me. Some of them are thinking they're educating people like me. But the more I learn, the more I realize I'm being manipulated. And it's like, okay, it comes down to eventually who do you trust? Whose whose story are you going to listen to? Or are you going to listen to any of them? And are you just going to listen to your own heart? And the trouble I have with that is that heart tends to not be fact related at all. So, you know, Gnosis is very nice if you're living on a mountain, but if you're living in town with people, you need to have some fact behind it.
Well, you need to, yeah, exactly. If you want to interact with what's real, then you yourself have to be what's real. And I think
Yeah,
that, yeah, I don't know that we have a clear picture of that in the majority now, even though a lot of people would think that they do. I don't think that they do. It's like, is someone less real because they're controlling you? I don't think that that makes sense because they're controlling you. You're not controlling them, right? So
good.
they obviously have an upper hand, and they achieved that through some type of dominance, and they achieved that dominance from some type of understanding that you don't have. So
Yeah,
who's more real? Right? Like that's not a, it's that exact framework and the way that we would like shift that is exactly what's wrong with them. We're just doing the same thing, right? So we're actually saying
exactly.
we're the same people. We're just on different sides of it. We're in a different tribe. That's all it is. And that's the problem, right? And until we start to see things as three people looking each other in the eye, right? Like
Yes.
it's
Until we start to see all of humanity as our own tribe. And I mean all of humanity. And I've heard the two species theory, but I know there are a lot of people like me who are hybrids between them.
well, I
So
think there's multiple branches of the two species, right? Like if
yes,
you want to say like nature has a path and we've augmented a path through technology, and then there's a bunch of subpaths on each one of those. So it's
yes,
not we yeah, and that's a problem, and it leads us into a lot of trouble, especially when we're talking about ETs and stuff. This generalization we like to do, right? Where we're like,
well, I've been kind of sticking to the definition that an ET is a physical being that's just not from here. And an interdimensional is one who isn't physical or can manifest physical, but isn't that way naturally. So I've been sticking to those two definitions, and it makes my speaking easier, but everybody who's using whatever definition they want, they just sort of go, oh. And you can watch the gears turning. You've got that look, you know exactly what I mean. So are they from inner Earth? Are they from outer space? Does it really matter?
Are they from all of the above? Is there subvariants of both? Like,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
what
Um,
I always bring up the Pleiadians thing because it's just hilarious to say that you're in touch with a Pleiadian. It's like the Pleiades is a series of like seven fucking stars, and we are on a planet that has one, right? So it's,
Actually, what
well,
I
one
was
lit up
taught
star.
was that Sol, our star, and both stars in the Sirius group are part of the Pleiades. So just you and me talking, we're a pair of Pleiadians.
Well, how could that even make sense? But anyways, the idea just being that if like our solar system has one star and one planet, even if those seven stars only had three planets, let's just compare one of those planets to this planet. Where on this planet is completely uniform in such a way that we could just say Earthian or
Terran,
Solian or Terran or any of that?
Terran.
We can't
That's
do
what
that,
that
right?
was the term we used in my program was
You
Terran.
can barely get away with saying American or Chinese because there's so much variance between the Chinese and the Americans, right? Or like Americans compared to other Americans are different. Chinese compared to other Chinese, maybe less so, are different, right? You can't generalize that way. And like that's
Humans are individuals, so why would we expect individuals from ET races to be any different?
exactly. And if they're not, that's probably a bigger problem than it is a good thing.
Uh, yeah, I've got memories of hive mind races, and those are pretty strict. I would much rather be an individual in a race that can't get their act together.
That
So, yeah. And that's how I feel about us. We're a race that can't get our act together. So we can't even, you know,
Well, I mean, we've had a lot working against us, but at the same time, there's just a level of responsibility we've never taken for ourselves, and we have to. And
yeah.
if we're not going to choose to, then we're going to be forced to, because that's what nature does, you know?
Or we will be forced to be subservient to someone else, and that someone else will eventually get rid of us
Well,
because
that wouldn't even be a choice. We could choose to be subservient to someone else, and then that can happen. Or we can be forced to take the responsibility and stop taking that path, right? Because how many times has this planet been hijacked by that path? Maybe humans just need to deal with humans and sort out their own shit for a change, right? Instead of looking towards like I don't even know, star seeds and ascended masters and everything else that have clearly been leading us
oh,
astray. If they even exist, they've clearly been leading us astray. So maybe it's about
clearly.
for us to look in the mirror and start having a conversation and look at each other and start having a conversation and look at our planet and start having a conversation and looking at our species and start having a conversation. And if we can't figure ourselves out, what makes us think we can figure everything else out?
Well, people who tell me, well, we're ready for ET contact. I have this question for them. If we're so ready to deal with another sentient species, why are we still having dolphin hunts?
Well, there's a lot of things that we're still doing and that we do that tell us that we're not, yeah,
I mean, that's one that's in your face.
yeah, we need to figure our own shit out. Most people can't even deal with themselves, let alone their neighbor, right? They
Hmm.
can't even deal with their own family, let alone the family of the next country. You know, the
Oh,
United States
my
can't even look after itself, let alone look after China. China can't look after itself, let alone look after Canada. Like yeah, we really have to take time to look in the mirror for a change instead of looking out there all the time.
I think it's a lot of distraction. I do know that a lot of science fiction was based on it was social commentary in a safe way of looking at it, but too many humans looked at the science fiction as this is the truth of what's out there, rather than looking at this is a description of our society. They missed the whole point.
Yeah, it's yeah, there's a lot of points that have been missed, I think, along the way.
Yeah, I so so you use your different tools in your toolbox in your counseling of folks like me, depending on what stage of the game that they're at when they approach you.
Yeah, I mean, like I even within clinical practices, like we don't take everyone who comes through our door, right? We make an assessment and they might not be someone we can help. So we're going to pass them off to someone else, refer them to someone else, right?
Pass
Well,
them on.
why it's just funny that people without training do things like this and then don't do that. You know what I mean? Where they would be the first person to do that. You know, you would figure the person with the degree and the certification and the practice would be less likely to pass off clients, but they're actually a lot more likely than like the tarot card reader who thinks that they can also counsel people, right? So it's
Yeah.
funny. It's fun.
I stumbled into it because people thought since I had survived the crap that I could help them. And a lot of people, I've told them, all I do is listen to you talk. And, you know, you can
I
talk.
mean, there's a certain amount of the certification that is bullshit, especially what we know now. Like most of the certifications and the licenses are based on what we now know was falsified data. So it's they've actually been taught incorrectly. But regardless of that, there's protocols, there's understandings such as the one that I was just talking about of passing off clients,
Mhm.
right? That are understood by people who've been trained professionally versus people who haven't, right? And I think that it's an ethics and morality thing that maybe doesn't exist in some people, not everybody, obviously. Like there's a lot of very moral people out there who would take your approach, right? Where it's like, this isn't really what I am. I can help you to this point. I'll hold your hand, I'll listen. And then beyond that, you know, go get some help, right? But
Yeah. Um, I end up with a lot of people coming to me, well, I have dreams. I have dreams. I have dreams. And the dreams are bothering them, but not enough for them to take responsibility for them being flashbacks or coded memories. Um, and I got to where, you remember when I had surgery on my shoulder? I, I stopped taking clients then. The people that are calling themselves my clients now are either people I had from before then that are still popping up, or they're people who have forced themselves on me. And you know, there are people like that. And so I'm actually looking for someone licensed to send these people to.
well, there is a lot of things online now that people can actually get to find, you know, proper counseling, get help. It's just such a broken system. So I also understand. Like,
Well, here in California, if I went in, I would be evaluated. And the first thing they would do is put me on an SSRI, whether I was depressed or not. And they would not even care that I had been on one before and went blind and had to be taken off it. They don't care. That is step number one. Step number two is if you talk about having memories of things that they don't understand to be 3D real, they put you on an antipsychotic. So you're already on 2 pharmaceutical drugs. And by this time, you are numb on a good day, unable to tell the difference between fantasy and reality. And the next step is to put you into a mental institution because the drugs didn't work. And they don't care what you remembered, what the problem is, how to go forward. Their solution is pharmaceutical. And that's why so many people are coming to me, is because, first of all, I can't give you the drugs. And secondly, they think I've figured out some magic way to get past it all. Sorry, guys, I had 2,197 alters and I have reintegrated 32 of them. I'm still a fucked up mess. That is the bottom line. And Shane is smiling because he understands exactly what I'm talking about. And so that's part of what's wrong with my community is I'm one of the ones who actually cares what happens to people. And then you've got this whole range of people who, for lack of a better term, are simply predators. They see an opportunity to make money, and that's all they care about. And that's the second step of why the community is fucked up. So you have real people who are messed up from these programs. And you have a few people who really care, but are not licensed and not qualified to be helping them. And then you've got a whole bunch of people who just want to make money off them and will tell them whatever they think they want to hear.
Yeah, just feeding that fantasy.
Yeah.
That's why I don't do like I don't do readings, right? Like, because I'm not going to tell you what you are, right? Like I read people, of course I do. I read everything, but I don't do readings because it's not my place to tell you what you are. What I can do is I can offer you some ways to figure out who you are, right?
Mm-hmm.
And usually my first question is always like, especially when if people are like, was I in programs? Are these memories real? Blah blah blah. Will it change your tomorrow to know that the answer is yes or no?
Yeah.
Right? Like we have to live here, right? So focus on that first.
Focus on doesn't matter because you're stuck with the memories, whether they were real or not.
And you have to go to work or not go to work or whatever your thing is tomorrow. And it's probably got nothing to do with most of the stuff you're bouncing around in your head, right? So, eyes on the prize, as they say. You're the prize is you, and if you were used in that way, the prize was you. So, why give up the prize now?
I'm going to have to think about that one. Why give up the prize now? The biggest issue that I had was how real it felt. And it really calmed me down whenever Doris Neely said that what I remembered was in my CIA archive report. Something about that I was not making it up, that I wasn't crazy. That mattered to me. And I feel that from a lot of the people who have come to me. So at some point, even if it was virtual reality, as you believe, we have to accept that these people are sitting there wondering, am I crazy?
That's why it matters, right? It's
That's
that
why it matters. That's,
it's been a lot of crazy making, and that's why it matters. That's what was so wrong about it all, right? If
well, violation of personal sovereignty, a violation of free will, and we were left so damaged.
so obviously we're gonna have to wrap this up. Maybe
Yeah.
I'll frame it like this, and maybe that'll help you understand. To me, if they put all of these humans through these programs because all of that stuff was real, that's excusable. The fact that it wasn't real is why it's not. That's why I have the problem I have with it. If they really were using me so that eventually this can just be what the human race does, I could accept that. But they used me for a bunch of bullshit that the human race will never experience because it was never real. And therefore, it was actually pointless and it was actually just torture. Right. Whereas if there was an outcome that was beneficial to everybody, like there would be if a lot of those programs were real, then it would be worth it in the end. Right.
I
Someone
don't
is
know.
actually,
Millions
the
of
only difference would
kids,
have been a choice.
millions of kids were tortured and left damaged, and I don't think that the damage was worth whatever benefit they thought, whether it was real or not.
Well, there is no benefit, and that's the problem,
That's
right?
there's
There is no
no,
benefit.
even if it were real, the people here are not getting any benefit from it.
We haven't made like any progress on planet Earth without harming something in the process through trial and error to get there, right? But the problem with this is there is no there to get to through all the trial. It was all just trial. And that's why I have the stance on it that I do. If I didn't, then it would be just, I would be looking at this with compassion, but I definitely wouldn't be angry about it because I would see, okay, this is eventually going to add layers to humanity that benefits them, but it's not. And it's all just leading us into a metaverse. So,
A metaverse of virtual reality.
virtual reality, right? We have proof of virtual reality. They're still shooting rockets into the ocean. Right? They still have unmanned drones to move at hypersonic speeds. They do not have the ability to do anything with all that alleged technology, but we do have virtual reality. So I think, again, proof being in the result is what I'm looking at. And until I see a different result, or proof, then I have to stick to what I witnessed and what I was told and what I experienced, which is that there is no secret space program and there is no possibility for such a space program to even exist based on what space actually is. And that all of that was meant to create basically exactly how we're seeing it play out in reality. Um, there is no gender identity. Your physical body just doesn't work anymore, so don't even bother looking after it. Just turn us all into gray aliens, right?
No thanks.
but it's working.
Anyway,
Yeah,
we are
I would
at
love to be
we are
wrong.
just past our hour that we discussed. Thank you for coming,
Always.
and thank you, audience, for listening, and good night.
We'll do it again sometime.